Hey guys, John here, and welcome back to 100 Sound Design Tips. So this is video 10. Wow, we've actually we're making progress. We only have 90 left to go. So the last couple videos we talked about bass, we talked about leads, and today we should talk about pads. Now on the surface, pads can be very simplistic, or they can be very complex, and it really depends on what kind of thing that you're going for. So I want to share with you a couple main components to kind of get you started and to kind of nudge you into the right direction. So this is one of my packs that I have, and I did a lot of pads here. This one's called Interstellar, and these are some more, I would suppose, ambient types of pads that they kind of create their own world. So here's one of them here. Right, we have that a little bit higher up. Another one that I really was happy with was where we are. So we have Deep Dive. This one's kind of cool here. Let's bring this down just a little bit here. Another interesting one was Hang In There. Let's bring this down too as well. Now for this, it's kind of one of those things where you can either go a direction where you press one note and the whole thing kind of just does its thing, right? It kind of just plays its life through. There's other kind of pads where you want to do some different chords and kind of, weave that into a song in the background to kind of pad the song, right? Hence the term. So let's kind of dive into this. Let's go menu initialize. Now on average or generally, pads are going to have a longer attack time and a longer release time. So let's first go ahead and add something like that. So let's increase our attack and our release. Maybe something like that, maybe a little bit longer release, and maybe drop down some of that sustain and increase that decay. To have that kind of sound contour. And generally, we're going to start adding some more harmonic content, and depending on how we add it and how we make that stuff move is going to be the key. Because if there's one thing you should take away from this video, it's going to be that pads are always going to be change over time, depending on how you get there. So let's add some unison and kind of start beefing this up a little bit. Maybe add some more voices. Let's go up to 7. Maybe a slower attack here. And on a basis or a basic way to look at this, let's start carving out the frequency. So add a little bit of some filtering. And maybe some envelope, but a little bit slower because this is going to be slow. It's going to be moving. Maybe we can go with like a low pass 24. Okay, so we have something like this so far. Now, a lot of the times for pads I don't really like having the main oscillator be the contributor of low end. So in that case, let's go to an EQ and let's just high pass a good amount of this here. So we have this, we have every time we hit a note, then this envelope is going to fire on the filter, moving our cutoff just a little bit. Now, let's say we're just holding down a note. Once we do this, the envelope's back to where it started, and it gets boring. Okay, let's start fixing this up here a little bit. Maybe we want to move this cutoff, but just randomly and somewhat different, right? So let's go to our LFO and go to a smooth random. And for this, since I kind of like keeping the cutoff at a certain spot and then modulating upwards, we're going to make this unipolar. So turn the offset to the right and let's drag and drop to the cutoff and give it some depth here. And this is going to be fast as it comes by default. So let's take it off sync and let's bring the speed down. And maybe a little bit less of the envelope here. How slowly starting to change the content, which is nice. So now we're down here. Starting to add some more. And that's kind of this point here. So that's just kind of one thing we can start doing. What we can also do is maybe move things around the stereo field. That could be also interesting as well. And we could use the same LFO, which, yes, that would be possible. However, remember, we made this unipolar and we want to have the stereo field kind of move back and forth a little bit. And for that, let's go ahead and add another LFO and slow it down and then bring this to the panning. And we can give this a good amount. Keep in mind, though, that since we're doing unison on full panning and kind of moving this a little bit, we're not going to notice it too much. We could bring this panning down a little bit like that. Now we're going to more notice kind of a less washed out version of a sound and kind of just moving a little bit back and forth. And then later on, we can let the reverb start to fill up the space. That can be a cool technique as well. Okay, so we have this here. This is kind of cool, but what else can we do to start making this different? So we're moving this filter, which is interesting. What if we did something kind of like moving bands of an EQ? That might be interesting to move. So maybe we can keep this down instead of boosting it. We can kind of cut things, maybe make this Q a little bit tighter. And maybe on the same LFO, maybe we can use this here and change the frequency of that. So let's drag and drop that there, and then let's give it some depth here. That can sound really smooth. And also we can check out the different filters. This one low pass 6 is smooth. We are going to let it in a little bit more high frequency content. If that's the case, we'll just bring this down a little bit more. That might be kind of cool. So we have this kind of motion going as well. Now, one of my favorite things to do, especially in Avenger, I don't think I've seen this feature anywhere else. However, if we go to our editor, this is really cool on pads. We have these two knobs called V strength and V speed. Now these kind of just move the harmonics and kind of just organically move the sound. So if we did this V strength, we kind of put this up here like that. We kind of see these harmonics are starting to remove some more than others and so on. And as we increase the speed, they start to move by themselves, which is really cool. Really fast is kind of a little excessive, but just a little slow like this. So this waveform is just moving and morphing over time and giving us a different sound every time. Okay, so we have this here. This filter, we may want to control this with a macro. So let's make it kind of dark at first and then drag and drop this here. And let's see how much depth we can give it. That might be kind of cool here. So let's call this filter. And for a pad like this, we may not actually even need any resonance. There is some frequencies in here that I really want to remove. I think it's that. Okay, we're starting to get somewhere. Maybe a tiny bit of compression can help here. But be careful with compression on pads because they can be very dynamic, quiet, and then they kind of get really loud and then soft. And sometimes once we start talking a little bit more about MSEGs, we can start creating our own curves, how they come in, how they stay loud, quiet, modulate, stuff like that. So that's something to think about. You don't want to do too much compression because then you're kind of defeating that purpose of dynamic range, not just in your volume, but also you might lose it in some stuff you're trying to automate and it won't, or modulate, and it won't be as effective. Okay, that sounded kind of cool here, and really we have not even gotten into effects. I wouldn't necessarily count EQ and compression as effects in the traditional sense, so it's still a dry patch. Now, at this point, it's still somewhat basic. Now, let's start adding some interesting effects that could make this a little bit cooler. One of those is going to be delay, and maybe for this we'll go for a quarter note and just filter that out a little bit here. So it's already kind of sounding kind of cool. We can add some reverb here. Now, one of my favorites here, and I always say this, is this Abyss. It just sounds so, I guess Abyss is the perfect way to describe it. It's just huge. It's, you know what I'm saying? Okay, we have something like this, kind of cool. However, what if we added a little shimmer on top of this? So at an octave here, let's kind of bring this up here. And so the reverb itself starts to be pitched up, which is very nice, very ethereal. Maybe for this cutoff here, maybe this LFO is a little bit too strong. So let's bring this down to 8 or something like that. And we can control the brightness more so with our macro. It's still moving over time, which is what we want, but now so that's kind of a cool thing as well. One thing that's kind of nice to do, so if we added another oscillator, let's mute this first one here, and let's add another amp, another filter, and another effect stack. For the second oscillator, we can basically say, I want this to go to filter 2, amp 2, and then out FX 2. So basically, we have a saw wave. Now, what's nice is to basically just use a sine wave, drop it down an octave. So we have something kind of like that. And for this guy, what we could do as well under pitch, let's make another pitch. And for this one, I guess, you know what we could do? Let's try this here. Let's go to pitch 2, and maybe we can make this mono. This first one's going to be off. We don't need to change anything here. But the second pitch, let's make this mono legato. So we have that kind of sound for our sine wave. And maybe, you know what? Let's do this. Let's go to saw and let's take all these out except for maybe this. That might be kind of nice for a little bass. Okay, so we have this. We probably don't really need to EQ. Maybe Let's try this. Because I really want the low end to be separated from the actual pad that we can control how we want to. And then the second one, I amp to. That might be kind of a cool sound. And then give it a little compression. And maybe keep this within a certain octave range, because up here, that doesn't really work too well. So in our zones, let's label things real quick. So we have this bass, and then we're playing here in this kind of octave range. Maybe after this, we don't really want that bass to be triggered anymore, so we can take it off there. So when we're playing up here, we're not triggering that bass. It's only going to be down here. And that's pretty low as well down there. So maybe we can just narrow down that range to something like this, maybe. So that's only where our bass is going to play. Okay, so we have that, and maybe we can also increase the attack, because if we play this at the same time, the bass is always kind of present and kind of just coming in a little too fast, coming in a little too hot. So let's increase the attack. So the bass fades in as well. And maybe we can do something with a sustain. Maybe sustain there. That might be kind of cool. Just a nice little rich, low bass staying there. So for this, we should put this on a macro. Let's do 3, for example. Let's do bass. Go to our mixer, and then let's bring this down, drag and drop, and then we're going to go to about 50 and bring this up here all the way to the top, and that's going to be its full volume. But maybe we want to give a little bit more back until it's kind of excessive, and then we can use this as like kind of mix control. So we can do kind of something like that. So this is a kind of a cool way to build or structure a pad, because we have our main oscillator, which is this one. I guess we'll call this main. Can I put parentheses in here? I can. That's cool. Okay, so we can have main. Hopefully anybody understands that. But we have main, which is going to be our main sound, and then we have our bass to kind of just hold the low end, and it's not competing or not getting processed by anything that the first effect stack is. So it's keeping them separate and then mixing them down over here with the macros to kind of make two things as a whole and make it workable. So in this case, if you did have a bass or some low end sound in your song and you want to use this pad, you just dip this macro and you just have that. If you wanted bass, you got it. Okay, so there's one thing like that. Now, something that's kind of cool as well that I like doing, so let's do the same thing once more. We're going to get a little bit more complex here. I just kind of want to show you what type of ideas are out there. So another filter, another amp, another effect stack, and for oscillator 3, let's go, pitch 1 is fine. Yes, pitch 1 should be fine. Filter 3, we're going to go to amp 3, and then out effects 3. So basically, we have another saw wave, but for this, let's use the triangle wave. Something like that. And then for this, let's go to quantize. Let's turn this bad boy on one of my favorites is this mysterious one. Kind of a mysterious scale, right? And let's add a little bit of glide, but first we're going to modulate this. So let's go to LFO and we're going to go to a random smooth. And for this, since we only want to go upwards, let's go for a bipolar signal, drag and drop this here. LFO3, let's give it some depth. And give it some glide. And let's slow this down here. Okay, we have something like that. Let's give it some delay and some reverb. Maybe it's a little too fast here. And amp 3, let's bring it down. So we have all this kind of together. And maybe for this LFO as well, that's changing the notes, we can use that as well on the cutoff and kind of open it up a little bit as the notes change. That might be kind of cool. Really drown this in reverb, or we can go with the root-averb and then also add the abyss to make it even more ethereal, I suppose, and maybe a little shimmer. Also, attack 3, this needs to be pretty fade up here and something like that. And I also want to just high pass the crap out of this, because as we're starting to layer things over each other, this should kind of go like that. We don't really want to care about anything over there. And a little bit of vibrato could be kind of cool. And also LFO3, let's move this across the stereo field a little bit with our panning here. And although this one is unipolar, so you know what, let's actually amp3 pan, let's remove that, and we could use LFO2 for that. That might be kind of cool. And maybe for oscillator 3, let's call this, I guess, triangle, something like that. And for this guy in the zones, maybe we don't necessarily want everything kind of where it should be. Maybe somewhere here. Because I don't want it triggering anywhere else but up there. And this should also have a little bit more release. That might be kind of cool. Okay. Maybe for the bass a little bit more attack. And then for macro 2, we can maybe make this also the triangle. So in the mixer, let's call this triangle. Yeah, that's fine. Drag and drop to triangle. Bring this down up all the way, which should be, where are you, triangle? Let's go 50. And then we can mix this in as well. And then the other one, I kind of wanted to add some type of rhythmic motion. Now, this is not necessarily for a pad, but you could do that. You can kind of break the rules a little bit. And for that, it was pretty simple. So FX4, let's do this one more time. Another oscillator. This guy is going to go to filter 4, amp 4, and then out effects 4. So this oscillator, unison, drop down the pan, something like that. Maybe something here, or no sustain. Kind of the sound that we're going for. And then to really get that low end, we're going to use the EQ again. And then compress it. Something like that. That might be kind of cool. And then send this to an ARP, and maybe this guy could be a little slower. And then maybe 2 right here. That might be interesting. I kind of just play with that sound, like the contours and all that. And it might be somewhat interesting to do some root reverb, but cut out a lot of the lows. So we have this. Kind of make it a little bit interesting. And maybe some delays. So we have this now. But we also don't want this to trigger on different notes again. So for that, we can go to our zones, label this again as heart, something like that. And then maybe let's bring it down to maybe here. And then these guys maybe like that. Small little range there. And for our ARP, we want to have this end or this start note probably be this guy, maybe, depending on what you want to do. And then the end note maybe here. So now we can start doing this nicely. And for our zones, we already used these knobs. So what we could do, use a macro and put this on the heart to bring this down. Double click 50, add heart. So we can turn this on and off with the macro. It's kind of interesting, actually. Let's also, I think in the ARP, let's actually end this note maybe earlier. Somewhere like that. Yeah. Okay. So before we wrap this up, this is kind of going a little bit longer than I expected. How long are we so far? 28 minutes. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's go to our Master Effects and just do some just final things here. Maybe make some more low ends. Maybe that might be a little bit much on the low end here. Amp 4, let's kind of slow the attack just a little bit. That might be kind of okay. Because it shouldn't necessarily be like a huge kick drum in your face. It should just be like some type of rhythmic kind of deal. And we have the ARP. This might be kind of cool. If you want to increase the speed, I guess you could do that. Totally up to you. Just thought of that right now. Interesting. Yeah, so off, we're going to be on an 8th, and then we turn it on, it's going to be 16, so... and make it faster. Depends on what you want to do. And then by turning some of the macros off, we're back to kind of where we started. So it's a pretty versatile preset. And sneak in that low end. And there you have it. So hopefully we started off kind of basic and we ended up going into some somewhat crazy territory, but hopefully you absorbed all of that 31 minutes. And yeah, thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next one.